The woman who appeared at Isaac Abernathy's ranch on a scorching July morning in 1878 looked like she had walked through hell itself, and he would later learn that assessment was not far from the truth. She stood at the edge of his property near Naco, Arizona, just a stone's throw from the Mexican border, her dress torn and dusty, her dark hair tangled around her face, and her eyes holding a depth of sorrow that made Isaac's chest tighten. He had been checking the fence line when he spotted her, and for a moment he thought she might be a mirage conjured by the relentless desert heat. But she was real, swaying slightly on her feet, one hand pressed against her ribs as if holding herself together through sheer will. Isaac dismounted quickly, his boots hitting the hard, packed earth with a thud. "Madam, are you hurt?" he called out, approaching slowly so as not to startle her. She looked at him with wide eyes the color of rich coffee, but she did not speak. Her lips parted as if she might answer, but no sound emerged. Instead, she took a step toward him and then her knees buckled. Isaac caught her before she hit the ground, feeling how light she was, how fragile she seemed despite the steel he could sense in her spine. He carried her back to his ranch house, a modest structure he had built himself over the past 3 years, since settling in this harsh but beautiful territory. His cook and housekeeper, an older woman named Martha, had left 2 weeks prior to care for her ailing sister in Tucson, and Isaac had been managing on his own, poorly. The kitchen was a disaster of unwashed dishes and burnt attempts at bread. He laid the woman on the spare bed in the small room off the kitchen, the room Martha had used. She was conscious but unresponsive to his questions, her eyes tracking him as he moved but her mouth remaining firmly closed. Isaac fetched water and a clean cloth, dabbing carefully at the dust and grime on her face. He could see now that she was young, perhaps 22 or 23, with delicate features and skin that had been bronzed by the sun. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked gently. She opened her mouth and he saw her try, saw the effort in her expression, but again, nothing came out. A single tear rolled down her cheek, and she turned her face away from him. Isaac sat back on his heels, understanding settling over him. She could not speak, whether from injury or shock or something else entirely. "It is all right," he said softly. "You do not have to talk. You are safe here. I am Isaac Abernathy, and this is my ranch. You can stay as long as you need." She looked back at him, and something in her expression shifted. Gratitude, perhaps, or relief. She reached out and took his hand, squeezing it once before releasing it. Over the next few days, Isaac learned more about his mysterious guest through observation and her careful gestures. She would not write either, he discovered when he offered her paper and pencil. She simply shook her head and set them aside. But she could hear perfectly well, responding to his words with nods and shakes of her head, with expressions that conveyed far more than he would have thought possible without speech. On the 3rd day, he found her in his kitchen. He had risen before dawn to start on the day's work, planning to make himself a miserable breakfast of hard tack and coffee, but when he entered the kitchen, he smelled bread baking. The woman stood at his stove, her back to him, her long hair braided neatly down her back. She had found one of Martha's old dresses in the chest, and it fit her reasonably well, though she had to roll up the sleeves. "You do not have to do that," Isaac said, startled. She turned and looked at him, and he saw determination in her eyes. She pointed at him, then at the door, making a shooing motion. He understood. She wanted to do this. Perhaps she needed to do this to feel useful, to repay him for his kindness in the only way she currently could. Isaac nodded slowly. "All right, but only if you are feeling well enough." She nodded firmly and turned back to the stove. From that day forward, she worked in his kitchen without speaking. Isaac would come in from the range to find meals prepared, the house tidier than it had been in weeks, his clothes mended and clean. She moved through his home like a ghost, silent and efficient, and he found himself watching for her, listening for the soft sounds of her movement, the swish of her skirts, the gentle clatter of dishes. He did not know her name. He had taken to calling her Clara in his mind, because she had bright, clear eyes, though he never spoke the name aloud. She remained a mystery, appearing from nowhere, unable or unwilling to communicate beyond her careful gestures and expressive eyes. 2 weeks after her arrival, Isaac rode into Naco to purchase supplies. The town was small, barely more than a collection of buildings clustered around a dusty main street, but it served the scattered ranchers and miners in the area. He stopped at the general store, giving his list to Mr. Henderson, the proprietor. "Saw smoke from your place," Henderson said as he gathered Isaac's supplies. "Thought maybe your cook came back." "No, just a woman who needed help," Isaac said carefully. "She has been assisting me in exchange for room and board." Henderson's eyebrows rose. "That right? What is her name?" "She has not said." "Has not said or cannot say?" Isaac met the man's eyes steadily. "Does it matter? She is doing honest work and I am providing her shelter." "Nothing improper about it." Henderson raised his hands. "No judgment here, Abernathy, just curious. You know how people talk." Isaac knew. In a town this small, everyone knew everyone's business or thought they did. He took his supplies and headed back to the ranch, feeling protective of the woman in a way that surprised him. He barely knew her, and yet the thought of anyone speaking ill of her made his jaw clench. When he returned home, he found her in the garden plot behind the house, the one he had started but never maintained properly. She had weeded it thoroughly and was carefully watering the struggling vegetables. She looked up at his approach and smiled, a real smile that transformed her face and made Isaac's heart do something strange in his chest. That night, as they sat at the table for supper, Isaac decided to try again. "I know you cannot or will not speak," he said gently, "but I would like to know something about you. Can you nod or shake your head to answer some questions?" She hesitated, then nodded once. "Good. Are you from around here?" A shake of her head. "Are you running from something?" A long pause, then a slow nod. "Something or someone?" She looked down at her hands. Another nod. Isaac felt anger kindle in his chest. "Did someone hurt you?" Her hands clenched in her lap. A nod. "Are you in danger now? Do I need to be watching for someone?" She looked up at him, and he saw fear flash across her face, but then she shook her head firmly. No. She did not believe anyone would come for her here. Isaac wanted to press for more information, but he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her breathing had quickened. He changed the subject. "This meal is delicious. Best thing I have eaten in months, thank you." She relaxed slightly, offering him a small smile. The weeks passed, turning into a month, then 2. The summer heat gradually gave way to the slightly cooler days of autumn. Isaac found himself structuring his days around the time he would spend in the house, around her. He would come in for breakfast, and she would have eggs and bacon ready, fresh bread and coffee. He would return at midday for a quick meal, and she would have something prepared, often with a glass of cool water waiting. And in the evenings, they would sit together at the table, eating in a silence that had become comfortable, companionable. He talked to her. He did not know why exactly, except that the silence did not feel empty when she was listening. He told her about his ranch, about his plans to expand his herd, about the challenges of raising cattle in this harsh climate. He told her about his past, about growing up in Missouri, about coming west after the war to start fresh. He told her about his family, his parents who had died of fever, his sister who had married and moved to California. And she listened. She listened with her whole body, leaning forward slightly, her eyes on his face, her expressions shifting with the story. When he spoke of sad things, her eyes would soften with sympathy. When he mentioned something funny, her lips would curve upward. She was the best listener he had ever known, and he found himself sharing things he had never told anyone. One evening in late September, as they finished supper, Isaac finally spoke the question that had been on his mind for weeks. "I do not know what to call you. I have been thinking of you as Clara, but that is not your name, is it?" She tilted her head, considering. Then she reached across the table and took his hand, placing it over her heart. He could feel it beating, strong and steady beneath his palm. She covered his hand with both of hers and looked at him with such intensity that he could barely breathe. "Clara," he said softly. "May I call you Clara?" She nodded, and he saw tears glimmer in her eyes. She released his hand and spelled something on the table with her finger. He watched carefully. "Clara," then she pointed at him. "You want me to call you Clara?" She nodded, smiling through her tears. "Clara it is, then." He paused. "Is that your real name, or are you giving me permission to use the name I chose?" She just smiled and stood, beginning to clear the dishes. He supposed it did not matter. She was Clara to him now, and that was enough. That night, Isaac lay in his bed and acknowledged what he had been trying to ignore for weeks. He was falling in love with her. With Clara, who worked in his kitchen without speaking, who had become essential to his days, who looked at him with eyes that saw straight through to his soul. It was madness. He knew almost nothing about her, not really. He did not know her past, her real name, why she could not speak. But he knew her in the ways that mattered. He knew she was kind, watching her feed scraps to the stray dogs that sometimes wandered by. He knew she was strong, seeing how she worked from dawn to dusk without complaint. He knew she was brave, having survived whatever horrors had brought her to his door. And he hoped, that perhaps she felt something for him too. He caught her watching him sometimes, her gaze lingering on his face, his hands. When he came in from working, she would bring him water without being asked, would stand close enough that he could smell the faint scent of soap and bread that clung to her. Once he had cut his hand while fixing a fence, and she had tended it with such gentle care, such concern in her eyes that he had nearly pulled her into his arms right then. But he did not. He could not. She was dependent on him for shelter, for safety. He would not take advantage of that, would not press his feelings on her when she had nowhere else to go. If she felt the same way, she would have to show him somehow. He would wait. October brought cooler weather and the first hints of the winter to come. Isaac began preparing for the hard months ahead, making sure his cattle had adequate shelter, stockpiling supplies. Clara helped in every way she could, preserving vegetables from the garden, sewing heavy curtains for the windows, knitting thick socks and scarves. One afternoon, Isaac was in the barn repairing a saddle when he heard the sound of horses approaching. He set down his tools and walked outside, shading his eyes against the sun. 3 men rode toward his ranch, and something about the way they sat their horses made Isaac tense. He walked to the house and opened the door. "Clara," he called. She appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Go to the back room and stay there. Lock the door. Do not come out until I tell you it is safe." Her eyes widened and she looked toward the approaching riders. Fear flashed across her face, but she nodded and hurried to the back room. Isaac heard the lock click into place. He stepped out onto his porch, his hand resting casually near the revolver on his hip. The 3 men reined in their horses a few yards away. They were rough-looking, dusty, and hard-eyed, the kind of men who made their living on the wrong side of the law. "Help you gentlemen?" Isaac asked, keeping his voice level. The leader, a man with a scar running down his left cheek, leaned forward in his saddle. "We are looking for someone." "A woman." Dark hair, dark eyes, cannot talk. Seen anyone like that? Isaac's heart pounded, but he kept his expression neutral. Cannot say I have. Why are you looking for her? She belongs to someone, the scarred man said. Ran away from where she was supposed to be. There is a reward for her return. Belongs to someone, Isaac repeated, his voice hardening. You make her sound like property. The man's eyes narrowed. None of your concern, rancher. You seen her or not? I have not seen anyone matching that description, Isaac lied smoothly. But if I do, I will be sure to notify the law in Naco. The scarred man studied him for a long moment, and Isaac held his gaze steadily. Finally, the man nodded. You do that. Come on, boys. The three men turned their horses and rode off. Isaac watched until they disappeared from view, then went to the back room. Clara, it is Isaac. They are gone. You can come out now. He heard the lock click and the door opened slowly. Clara stood there, her face pale, her whole body trembling. She looked up at him with such terror in her eyes that Isaac could not stop himself. He stepped forward and pulled her into his arms, holding her close. You are safe, he murmured into her hair. I will not let anyone take you. I promise you that. She clung to him, her hands fisting in his shirt, her face pressed against his chest. He could feel her shaking, could feel the rapid beat of her heart. He held her until the trembling subsided, until her breathing slowed. When she finally pulled back, she looked up at him, and he saw something new in her eyes, something that made his breath catch. She reached up and touched his face, her palm cupping his cheek. Then she went up on her toes and pressed her lips to his, a gentle, tentative kiss that sent warmth flooding through him. Isaac froze for a heartbeat, then kissed her back, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her closer. The kiss deepened, became something more than tentative, more than gentle. It was a promise, a declaration. Everything they could not say with words poured into this single moment of connection. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. Clara, he whispered, I love you. I know I should not, I know it is too soon, but I do, I love you. She pulled back just enough to look into his eyes, and he saw his feelings reflected there. She loved him too. He could see it as clearly as if she had shouted it from the rooftops. She took his hand and placed it over her heart again, then took his other hand and placed it over his own heart. Then she brought his hands together, intertwining their fingers. Her meaning was clear. Their hearts were connected now, bound together. That night, everything changed. They did not speak of the future, of what would happen if those men came back, of all the obstacles that stood between them and happiness. They simply existed in the present, in the warmth of their newfound understanding. Clara made supper as always, but Isaac helped her, working beside her in the kitchen, their hands brushing, their eyes meeting. They ate together, and afterward, Isaac built up the fire against the autumn chill. They sat together on his old sofa, Clara tucked against his side, his arm around her shoulders. I need to know, Isaac said quietly. I need to know what you are running from, who those men work for. I need to know how to protect you. Clara was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood and went to the kitchen, returning with a piece of charcoal from the stove and a smooth board they sometimes used for planning. She sat beside him and began to draw. Her hand moved surely, sketching out a scene. Isaac watched as an image emerged, a large house, almost a mansion. A man standing in front of it, tall and imposing. Clara drew herself next to the man, but not beside him. Behind him, subservient. You worked for this man? Isaac asked. She nodded, then continued drawing. She sketched more scenes, each one telling a piece of her story. The man forcing her to work, other people around her, all of them looking frightened, bars on windows, locks on doors. It was not a home, it was a prison. He kept you prisoner, Isaac said, anger building in his chest. You and others. She nodded, her hand moving faster now. She drew herself, trying to speak, then the man's hand over her mouth. She drew a mark across her throat, then shook her head violently. He hurt you when you tried to speak. Isaac understood. He threatened worse if you ever spoke again. Tears streamed down Clara's face now, but she kept drawing. She showed herself escaping, running through the desert, barely surviving. She showed her fear, her desperation. And then she drew Isaac's ranch, drew herself arriving, and the charcoal moved differently here, softer, gentler. She drew Isaac reaching out to her, drew herself safe. Isaac set the board aside and pulled her into his arms again. I will not let him have you back. Never. You are free now, Clara. You are safe, and you are free, and you are loved. She sobbed against his chest, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. He held her through it all, stroking her hair, murmuring words of comfort. When she finally quieted, exhausted from the emotional storm, he carried her to her room and laid her gently on the bed. He started to leave, but she caught his hand, looking up at him with pleading eyes. You want me to stay? He asked. She nodded. I will stay, he promised. He pulled a chair over to her bedside and sat, still holding her hand. I will be right here. Sleep now. She closed her eyes, her grip on his hand never loosening, and eventually she slept. Isaac watched her in the dim lamplight, this woman who had walked into his life and stolen his heart without saying a single word. He thought about the men who had come looking for her, about the man who had imprisoned her and hurt her so badly that she could not speak. He thought about the danger she was still in, and he made himself a promise. He would keep her safe. Whatever it took, whoever he had to fight, he would protect her. The next morning, Isaac rode into Naco and went straight to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Daniels was an older man, grizzled and experienced, fair in his dealings. Isaac trusted him as much as he trusted anyone. Abernathy, Daniels greeted him. What brings you to town? I need to report something, Isaac said. There are men looking for a woman, claiming she belongs to someone, that she ran away. They came to my ranch yesterday asking about her. Daniels leaned back in his chair. What did you tell them? That I had not seen her, but I lied. She has been staying at my ranch for nearly 3 months now, working as my cook and housekeeper. Why lie to them? Because I do not believe their story. I believe they work for a man who held her and others prisoner, forced them to work. She escaped, and they want her back. Daniels was quiet for a moment. That is a serious accusation. Do you have proof? Only her story told through drawings. She cannot speak, Sheriff. I believe the man who held her threatened her into silence. Cannot speak or will not speak. I do not know. Does it matter? She is terrified of being found, and those men looked like the kind who would drag her back whether she wanted to go or not. Daniels stood and walked to his window, looking out at the dusty street. The law is complicated when it comes to things like this, Abernathy. If she was working off a debt, or if there is some kind of contract, I cannot interfere without more information. What if there is no legitimate contract? What if she was simply a prisoner? Then that is a different matter entirely, but I would need evidence. Daniels turned to face him. Here is what I can do. I will ask around, see if anyone knows anything about a man keeping workers prisoner. If I find evidence of illegal activity, I will pursue it. In the meantime, you keep that woman safe on your ranch. Do not let those men take her, but do not shoot them without cause either. Understood. Understood, Isaac said, though he knew that if those men tried to take Clara by force, he would do whatever was necessary to stop them. He rode back to his ranch, his mind churning. When he arrived, he found Clara in the kitchen as usual, but she looked up at him with anxious eyes. He told her where he had been, what the sheriff had said. We will figure this out, he assured her. But I need to know more. The man who held you, what is his name? Where is his property? Clara hesitated, then picked up the charcoal again. She wrote slowly, carefully, "Thornton, Tucson." "Thornton," Isaac repeated. "That is his name," she nodded. "And he is in Tucson." Another nod. Isaac knew Tucson. It was a growing city several days' ride north of Naco, large enough that a man could conduct illegal business without too much scrutiny if he was clever about it. "I will write to the authorities there," he said. "I will see what can be done." Over the next few weeks, Isaac did exactly that. He wrote letters, asking careful questions, trying to find out what he could about this man Thornton. He also fortified his ranch, making sure his rifle was clean and loaded, teaching Clara how to shoot in case she ever needed to defend herself. She learned quickly, her hands steady on the gun despite her fear. The responses to his letters were disappointing. Thornton was a respected businessman in Tucson, involved in several enterprises. No one had any knowledge of illegal activities. Either Thornton was very good at hiding his crimes, or people were afraid to speak against him. "We may have to find another way," Isaac told Clara one evening in mid-November. They were sitting together after supper, as had become their habit, her body curved against his on the sofa. "The law may not help us." Clara looked up at him, and he saw acceptance in her eyes. She had not expected the law to help. She had seen too much, experienced too much to have faith in official justice. "I will not let him take you back," Isaac said fiercely. "Even if we have to leave here, start over somewhere else, I will keep you safe." She reached up and touched his face, and he turned to kiss her palm. Their relationship had deepened over these weeks, growing more intimate though still chaste. Isaac wanted her with a fierceness that sometimes surprised him, but he also wanted to do right by her. He wanted to marry her, make her his wife in the eyes of God and the law, give her the protection of his name. "Marry me," he said suddenly, the words tumbling out before he could think them through. "Clara, marry me. Let me give you my name, my protection. Let me love you for the rest of our lives." Her eyes widened, and for a moment she simply stared at him. Then she smiled, the brightest smile he had ever seen, and nodded enthusiastically. Yes, yes, she would marry him. Isaac laughed and pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply. When they broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "We will do it properly. I will speak to the preacher in Naco, arrange for a ceremony. You will be Mrs. Abernathy, and no one will have any claim on you but me." They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Naco. Clara wore a dress that the local seamstress had made for her, simple but beautiful, the cream-colored fabric bringing out the warmth of her skin. Isaac wore his best suit, his hair neatly combed, his heart pounding with joy and nervousness. Sheriff Daniels stood as witness, along with the seamstress and her husband. Clara could not speak her vows, but the preacher allowed her to nod her agreement, and Isaac spoke his vows with a voice that rang clear and true through the small church. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Isaac kissed his bride with all the love and passion he had been holding back, and she kissed him back just as fervently. They returned to the ranch as husband and wife, and that night Clara came to Isaac's room, to their room now. She stood in the doorway in her nightgown, her long dark hair loose around her shoulders, and looked at him with eyes full of love and trust and desire. Isaac held out his hand, and she took it, letting him draw her into the room, into his arms, into his bed. He loved her tenderly that night, taking his time, making sure she felt cherished and safe. She responded to his touch with a passion that matched his own, her silence filled with soft sounds of pleasure that were more eloquent than any words could have been. Afterward they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his arms around her, both of them drifting in the warm afterglow. "I love you, Mrs. Abernathy," Isaac murmured into her hair. She tilted her head back to look at him and smiled, then placed her hand over his heart. He understood. She loved him too. She always would. Winter settled over the Arizona territory, bringing cold nights and occasionally even snow. Isaac and Clara worked together to keep the ranch running, to keep the cattle fed and sheltered. They were happy, blissfully so, despite the shadow of Thornton still hanging over them. In January of 1879, that shadow grew darker. Isaac came in from working one day to find Clara standing at the window, her face pale, her hands trembling. She pointed outside and he looked to see a lone rider approaching. Isaac recognized him, the scarred man from before. "Go to the back room," Isaac said quietly. "Take the rifle. If anything happens to me, if he gets past me, you shoot him. Do you understand?" Clara's eyes were wide with fear, but she nodded and did as he said. Isaac checked his revolver and stepped out onto the porch. The scarred man reined in his horse and looked at Isaac with cold eyes. "We meet again, rancher." "So we do," Isaac said evenly. "You are on my property uninvited. State your business and leave." "My business is the woman you are hiding. We know she is here. We have been watching your ranch, saw you take her into town, saw the ceremony, quite touching." Isaac's hand moved closer to his gun. "My wife is none of your concern." "Your wife," the man repeated mockingly. "You think a marriage ceremony changes anything? She belongs to Mr. Thornton. He paid good money for her and he wants his property back." "Paid good money for her." Isaac's voice was low and dangerous. "Are you admitting that Thornton buys and sells human beings?" "I am admitting nothing. I am here to collect what is his. She is my wife now. She is free. You will not take her." The scarred man's hand moved toward his gun. "I was hoping you would see reason, but I can see you are one of those stubborn types. Fine. We will do this the hard way." "There will be no hard way," said a new voice. Both Isaac and the scarred man turned to see Sheriff Daniels riding up, his own gun drawn. "You are trespassing on private property and threatening a citizen. I suggest you turn around and ride out of my territory." The scarred man's eyes narrowed. "This is not your concern, Sheriff. A man threatening violence on my watch is absolutely my concern. Now, you have two choices. You can leave peacefully, or I can arrest you for trespassing and threatening behavior. What will it be?" For a long moment, the scarred man stared at the sheriff, clearly weighing his options. Then he looked back at Isaac. "This is not over. Mr. Thornton does not give up what is his. Tell Mr. Thornton that Clara Abernathy is a free woman, legally married and under my protection," Isaac said. "If he has a problem with that, he can take it up with the law. The real law, not hired thugs." The scarred man's jaw clenched, but he turned his horse and rode away. Isaac watched until he disappeared, then looked at Sheriff Daniels. "Thank you. I did some more digging after our conversation," Daniels said, holstering his gun. "Sent some telegrams to colleagues in other territories. Seems there have been rumors about Thornton for years, but no one could ever make anything stick. He is careful, always has papers that make his workers look like they are there voluntarily, working off debts or fulfilling contracts. But they are not voluntary. No, I do not believe they are. I also learned that several workers have disappeared over the years. Some say they escaped. Others say something worse happened to them." Daniels paused. "Your wife was brave to run. She was also lucky you found her." "I was the lucky one," Isaac said quietly. Daniels smiled slightly. "I will keep an eye out, make sure those men do not come back. But Abernathy, you should know that legally, Thornton might have a case if he has papers suggesting your wife owed him money or was under contract. A marriage might not be enough to protect her. Then, what will be enough? Proof of his illegal activities. If we can prove he is holding people against their will, forcing them to work, that changes everything. But we would need someone willing to testify, and that is where it gets difficult. People are afraid of him." Isaac thought about this. What if there was physical evidence? Documents, records, something that proved he was buying and selling people. That would help. Do you have access to anything like that? No, but I might know someone who does. Isaac was thinking of Clara, of the other people she had drawn in her pictures. If she had escaped, perhaps others had too. Perhaps some of them would be willing to help. After the sheriff left, Isaac went to find Clara. She was still in the back room, the rifle across her lap, her face drawn with tension. When she saw him, she set the rifle aside and stood, and he pulled her into his arms. He is gone. The sheriff sent him away, but Clara, we need to end this permanently. We need to find a way to stop Thornton from ever coming after you again. She pulled back and looked up at him, questions in her eyes. The sheriff says we need proof of Thornton's crimes. Documents, records, something concrete. I know it is a lot to ask, but do you know where he kept such things? Is there a way to get them? Clara was silent, her expression troubled. Then she nodded slowly and took his hand, leading him to the kitchen. She picked up the charcoal and began to draw again. She sketched Thornton's house, then showed a room, an office with a desk and file cabinets. She pointed to the cabinets emphatically, then drew papers. The records are in his office, Isaac said. In the file cabinets, she nodded. You know what security he has. Guards, locks, she drew more, showing men patrolling, dogs, high walls. It was a fortress. Isaac studied the drawings, his mind working. It would be almost impossible to break in there. Clara shook her head and pointed at herself, then at the drawings. She gestured, showing herself moving through the house, avoiding the guards, familiar with the layout. You know the house well enough to get in and out without being caught. She nodded, but then she shook her head violently, pointing at Isaac. She did not want him to go. It was too dangerous. I will not let you go alone, Isaac said firmly. And I will not let you go at all unless we have a solid plan. Let me think about this. Over the next few days, Isaac considered their options. It was risky, potentially deadly, but it might also be the only way to truly free Clara and any others Thornton held captive. Finally, he made a decision. He would not ask Clara to return to that place of horror, but he also could not get the information they needed without her help. He presented his plan to her one evening. We will go together. You will guide me, show me where to go, but you will stay outside, safe, ready to run if anything goes wrong. I will go into the house, get the documents, and get out. Then we take everything to the authorities, not just here but in Tucson and even the territorial capital if necessary. We make sure everyone knows what Thornton has been doing. Clara listened, her expression fearful but determined. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she picked up the charcoal and wrote, "Dangerous. I know it is dangerous. But we cannot live the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders, waiting for Thornton's men to come back. We need to end this." She studied him, and he could see her mind working, weighing the risks. Finally, she nodded. They would do it, together. Isaac spent the next week preparing. He purchased black clothing suitable for moving unseen in the dark. He cleaned and oiled his guns. He studied the maps Clara drew of Thornton's property and house, memorizing every detail. He wrote a letter to Sheriff Daniels, to be delivered only if he and Clara did not return, explaining what they had done and why. They left for Tucson in early February, traveling slowly to preserve their horses' strength. It took them 4 days to reach the city, and they spent another 2 days watching Thornton's property from a distance, noting the patterns of the guards, the comings and goings. Clara's drawings had been accurate. The place was a fortress, but Clara knew something the guards did not. She showed Isaac a section of the wall that was lower than the rest, hidden by overgrown bushes. It was where she had escaped and where they would enter. They waited until a moonless night, the darkness thick and concealing. Dressed in black, They approached the wall in silence. Isaac boosted Clara over first, then pulled himself up. They dropped into the garden on the other side, landing in soft earth. Clara took his hand and led him through the darkness with the confidence of someone who knew every inch of this place. They reached the house, and Clara pointed to a window on the ground floor. She made a gesture indicating it would be unlocked. Isaac tested it carefully, and sure enough, it slid open smoothly. Clara started to climb through, but Isaac stopped her. "You stay here," he whispered. "Keep watch. If you see anyone coming, you run. Do not wait for me. Promise me." She hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Isaac climbed through the window and found himself in a dark hallway. He moved silently, following the mental map Clara had given him. Left at the end of the hall, third door on the right. That would be Thornton's office. He heard voices ahead and pressed himself into a shadowed alcove. Two men walked past, talking in low voices about some shipment expected the next day. Isaac waited until they were gone, then continued. He found the door to the office and tried the handle. Locked. He had expected that. He pulled out a small set of picks he had purchased and worked at the lock, his hands steady despite his racing heart. The lock clicked open, and he slipped inside, closing the door behind him. The office was large, dominated by a massive desk, and the file cabinets Clara had drawn. Isaac lit the small lamp he had brought, keeping the flame low. He started with the cabinets, rifling through files. Most were mundane business records, but in the third cabinet he found what he was looking for. The files were meticulously organized: names, dates, amounts paid. But these were not employees or legitimate workers. These were purchases. Human beings bought and sold like cattle. Isaac's stomach turned as he read the entries. There were dozens of names spanning years. Some entries had notes about sales, about workers being moved or disposed of. It was sickening. He gathered all the relevant documents, stuffing them into the satchel he had brought. He was nearly finished when he heard a sound outside the door. Footsteps, approaching. Isaac froze, his hand moving to his gun. The door opened and a man stepped in. He was tall, well-dressed, with cold eyes that widened in surprise when he saw Isaac. "Who are you? What are you doing in my office, Thornton?" Isaac recognized him from Clara's drawings. "Getting the evidence to put you in prison," Isaac said, backing toward the window. Thornton's hand moved to a gun at his side, but Isaac was faster. He drew and fired, the shot echoing through the house. Thornton fell, clutching his shoulder, and Isaac did not wait to see more. He threw open the window and climbed out, running toward where he had left Clara. She was there, her eyes wide with fear at the sound of the gunshot. Isaac grabbed her hand. "Run!" They ran through the garden, shouting erupting behind them. They reached the wall, and Isaac practically threw Clara over it, then vaulted over himself. They ran to where they had left their horses, mounted, and rode hard into the night. Behind them they could hear pursuit, but they had a head start, and their horses were fresh. They rode through the darkness, putting distance between themselves and Thornton's property. When dawn broke, they were miles away, and there was no sign of anyone following. They did not stop until they reached a small town halfway between Tucson and Naco. Isaac rented a room and they collapsed, exhausted. Later, after they had rested and eaten, Isaac examined the documents he had taken. They were damning, absolutely damning. With these, Thornton would not be able to hide behind his respectable facade anymore. Isaac sent telegrams to every law enforcement office he could think of. Tucson, the territorial marshal, even authorities in neighboring territories. He included detailed information about what they had found, where the documents could be collected. Then he and Clara returned to Naco to Sheriff Daniels. The sheriff read through the documents with growing anger. "This is incredible and terrible. How many people has this man destroyed?" He looked up at Isaac and Clara. "You did a brave thing getting these. A foolish thing, maybe, but brave." "Will it be enough?" Isaac asked. "It will be more than enough. I will send these to the territorial marshal myself, make sure they get into the right hands. With this evidence, Thornton will be arrested, tried, and convicted. You have my word on that." And he was right. Over the next few weeks, news filtered back to Naco. Thornton had been arrested. His property had been raided, and 17 people who had been held there against their will were freed. The documents Isaac had stolen proved invaluable, leading to charges not just against Thornton but against several of his associates and clients. It was a scandal that rocked Tucson and made news across the territory. For Clara and Isaac, it meant freedom. True freedom. No more looking over their shoulders, no more fear of men coming to take her away. Clara was safe and she was his, and nothing would ever change that. Life settled into a peaceful rhythm on the ranch. Spring came, bringing new life to the desert. Clara's garden flourished under her care, and the cattle herd grew. Isaac expanded the ranch house, adding rooms in anticipation of the family he hoped they would have. In May, Clara came to him with a particular glow in her eyes and took his hand, placing it on her still flat stomach. Isaac understood immediately. A child. They were going to have a child. He swept her into his arms, spinning her around, both of them laughing silently. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and into the fall. Clara bloomed, her happiness evident in every smile, every gentle touch. Isaac doted on her, doing everything he could to make her comfortable, to show her how loved she was. In early December, on a cold night with stars bright in the clear sky, Clara went into labor. The midwife from Naco came to assist, and Isaac paced outside the room, his heart in his throat every time he heard a sound from within. Finally, after hours that felt like days, he heard a different sound, the cry of a baby. The midwife opened the door, smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Abernathy. A healthy, strong boy, and your wife did wonderfully." Isaac rushed into the room. Clara lay in the bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle. She looked up at him and smiled, and Isaac felt his heart expand with so much love he thought it might burst. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at his son. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was making small, fussy sounds, his tiny fists waving. "He is perfect," Isaac whispered. "You are perfect. I love you both so much." Clara reached up and touched his face, and he saw tears in her eyes. Happy tears. She had never imagined this, he realized. She had never thought she would have a family, a home, a life filled with love. But she had it now, and so did he. They named the boy Samuel after Isaac's father. Samuel Isaac Abernathy, born into freedom and love. Isaac held him while Clara rested, marveling at the tiny life they had created. As the months passed, Samuel grew strong and healthy. He had Clara's dark eyes and Isaac's smile, and he was adored by both his parents. Clara proved to be a wonderful mother, patient and loving, and Isaac discovered depths of protectiveness he had not known he possessed. One evening, when Samuel was about 6 months old and babbling happily on a blanket on the floor, Clara came to sit beside Isaac on the sofa. She had something in her hand, a piece of paper. She offered it to him, and he saw it was a drawing. But not like the ones she usually made. This drawing showed their family, Isaac, Clara, and Samuel, but Clara had also drawn something else. She had drawn herself with her mouth open, and coming from it were musical notes. Isaac looked at her in confusion. "I do not understand." Clara took a deep breath, and he saw determination in her eyes. Then, slowly, carefully, she opened her mouth and spoke. Her voice was rusty, rough from disuse, barely more than a whisper, but it was there. "I love you." Isaac stared at her in shock. "Clara, you spoke. You actually spoke." "I love you," she said again, her voice a little stronger. Tears streamed down her face. "I love you, Isaac. I love you, and I love our son, and I am not afraid anymore. Thornton took my voice from me, but I am taking it back, because of you, because you showed me what love really is, what freedom really is." Isaac pulled her into his arms, his own eyes wet. "I love you too, so much. I cannot believe you spoke. Your voice is beautiful." She laughed, the sound strange and wonderful. "It will get better. I will practice. I want to tell our son I love him. I want to sing him lullabies. I want to say your name." And she did. Over the following weeks and months, Clara's voice grew stronger. She talked more each day, making up for years of silence. She sang to Samuel, soft, sweet songs that Isaac had never heard before, songs from her childhood. She told Isaac stories about her life before Thornton, about her family who had died in a fever epidemic when she was 17, leaving her alone and vulnerable, easy prey for a man like Thornton. She also told him about the other workers, the ones who had been freed when Thornton was arrested. Some had returned to their families. Others, like her, had no family to return to and were building new lives. Clara wrote letters to several of them, and they wrote back, sharing their stories of recovery and hope. 2 years after Samuel was born, Clara gave birth to a daughter. They named her Grace, because she was a gift of grace in their lives. Grace had Isaac's light brown hair and Clara's delicate features, and she was as sweet-natured as her brother was energetic. The ranch prospered. Isaac's cattle business grew, and he hired help to manage the expanded herd. Clara's garden became well known in the area, her vegetables and herbs prized for their quality. They were happy, genuinely happy, in a way that neither had ever dreamed possible. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Isaac took Clara into town for a celebration. They left the children with a trusted neighbor and went to the small hotel in Naco, the nicest place available. They had dinner and danced, Clara laughing as Isaac spun her around the floor. Later, in their room, Clara looked at Isaac with eyes full of love. "Do you remember when I first came to your ranch?" she asked. Her voice was fully recovered now, warm and clear. "Of course. You looked like you had walked through hell." "I had. And then I walked into heaven, though I did not know it yet." She took his hands. "I could not speak then. I thought I would never speak again. But you loved me anyway. You loved me when I was broken and afraid. You loved me when you knew nothing about me. You loved me without expecting anything in return." "I loved you because I could not help myself," Isaac said. "You worked in my kitchen without speaking, and somehow, in the silence, I heard everything your heart was saying. I learned that your silence hid the deepest love I have ever known. And you drew that love out of me. You made me whole again. You gave me my voice back, my life back, my hope back." Clara smiled. "I was silent for so long, but now I will never stop telling you how much I love you. Never." Isaac kissed her, deep and long. "I will never stop showing you how much I love you. You and our children, you are my whole world." They stayed in each other's arms that night, talking and loving and planning for the future. They talked about expanding the ranch further, about having more children, about growing old together on this land they both loved, and all of it came to pass. They had 2 more children, another boy and another girl. Their ranch became one of the most successful in the area. Clara started a small school for the children of nearby ranches, teaching them reading and writing and arithmetic. Isaac became a respected member of the community, known for his fairness and integrity. But through all of it, through all the years and changes and challenges, the core of their life remained the same. They loved each other with a depth and constancy that never wavered. The silence that had once defined Clara became just a memory, replaced by laughter and conversation and the happy noise of a full life. Sometimes, On quiet evenings after the children were asleep, Clara would sit with Isaac on the porch of their ranch house, looking out at the desert stars. She would take his hand and squeeze it, and he would squeeze back, and in that simple gesture was everything they had been through, everything they had built together. "I never thanked you properly," Clara said one such evening, "for saving me." "You saved me too," Isaac replied. "I was lonely before you came. I had land and cattle, but I did not have a home. You gave me that. You gave me everything." "We saved each other then," Clara said, smiling, "and we will keep saving each other every day for the rest of our lives." And they did. Through the years that followed, through joys and sorrows, through good times and hard times, they saved each other again and again with their love, their commitment, their unwavering faith in what they had built together. Isaac and Clara Abernathy lived long, full lives on their ranch near Naco, Arizona. They watched their children grow and have children of their own. They celebrated anniversaries and birthdays and holidays surrounded by family and friends. They faced challenges and overcame them together. They grew old side by side, their love only deepening with time. When Isaac was 72 years old, he fell ill. It was winter, and a harsh cold had settled into his lungs. Clara nursed him carefully, but they both knew his time was limited. Their children came to visit, their grandchildren, and the house was full of the family they had created. One night, as Clara sat by his bedside, Isaac took her hand. His grip was weak, but his eyes were still bright with love. "I've had a good life," he said softly, "the best life." "Because of you, because of us," Clara corrected gently. "We built this together." "Together," Isaac agreed. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Do you remember the day you came to my ranch? You could not speak, but I fell in love with you anyway." "I remember. I was so afraid. And then you were kind to me, and I started to hope again." "You worked in my kitchen without speaking," Isaac said, his voice growing fainter. "And I learned that your silence hid the deepest love I have ever known." Tears streamed down Clara's face. "I love you, Isaac Abernathy. I have loved you from the very beginning, and I will love you forever." "Forever," Isaac whispered. He smiled at her, that warm, gentle smile she had fallen in love with so many years ago, and then he closed his eyes and slipped away peacefully. Clara mourned him deeply, but she was not alone. Her children and grandchildren surrounded her with love and support. She continued to live on the ranch, tending her garden, teaching in her school, sharing stories about Isaac with anyone who would listen. She lived another 12 years, long enough to see great-grandchildren born, long enough to know that the love she and Isaac had shared would continue through the generations. When she finally passed away at the age of 83, it was quietly in her sleep, and those who found her said she had a smile on her face, as if she was happy to be reunited with the man she had loved so deeply. They buried her next to Isaac under a large cottonwood tree on the ranch, and their descendants made sure the graves were always tended, always decorated with fresh flowers from the garden Clara had loved. The ranch stayed in the family, passed down from generation to generation, and with it the story of Isaac and Clara, the cowboy and the silent woman who had found love in the harsh beauty of the Arizona desert. Their story became legend in the area. People told it around campfires and at family gatherings, the tale of the woman who appeared from nowhere, unable to speak, and the cowboy who loved her anyway. They told of how she worked in his kitchen without speaking, how he learned that her silence hid the deepest love, and how their love had conquered fear and danger, and the cruelty of the past to build something beautiful and lasting. And always, when the story was told, it ended the same way, with a reminder that true love does not need words, that the deepest connections are those of the heart, and that sometimes the greatest treasures come from the most unexpected places. Isaac and Clara's love had been tested by fire and proven pure, and it had created a legacy that would endure for generations. The ranch they built together still stands today, a testament to their love and their courage. The garden still blooms each spring. The house still echoes with laughter and life. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the desert stars shine bright and the wind whispers through the cottonwood tree, people say you can feel their presence there, still together, still in love, still watching over the land and the family they created. Their love story is one of the Old West's most beautiful, a reminder that even in the hardest times and the harshest places, love can flourish and grow and create something wonderful. Isaac and Clara proved that silence can speak volumes, that broken things can be mended, that two people from different worlds can come together and build a life that matters. Years after Clara's passing, her great-granddaughter found a letter tucked away in an old trunk. It was written in Clara's hand, dated shortly before her death. The letter was addressed to future generations, and in it, Clara had written out the story of her life with Isaac, wanting to make sure it was preserved accurately for those who would come after. In the letter, she wrote, "I want my descendants to know that love is the most powerful force in the world. When I came to Isaac's ranch, I was broken in body and spirit. I had been hurt so badly that I could not speak. I had lost my voice, my hope, my sense of self. But Isaac did not see a broken woman. He saw someone worth loving, worth protecting, worth cherishing. He gave me time to heal. He gave me space to breathe. He gave me his heart without asking for anything in return. And slowly, carefully, he helped me find myself again. He helped me find my voice again, both literally and figuratively. Our love was built on patience, on kindness, on the willingness to see beyond the surface to the person underneath. I worked in his kitchen without speaking for months, but in that silence, we learned to communicate in deeper ways. We learned to read each other's hearts, and when I finally spoke again, when I finally told him I loved him, it was the truest thing I have ever said. We built a beautiful life together, Isaac and I. We faced challenges and overcame them. We raised children who knew they were loved. We created a home that was filled with warmth and joy, and we loved each other until the very end and beyond. I hope that you, whoever you are reading this, will find a love like ours, a love that sees you for who you truly are, a love that helps you heal from your wounds, a love that gives you the courage to be your best self. That is the legacy I want to leave behind. Not the ranch, not the land, but the knowledge that true love exists and it is worth fighting for, worth waiting for, worth everything. The letter became a treasured family heirloom, read at weddings and anniversaries, a reminder of the foundation on which the family was built. And the story of Isaac and Clara continued to inspire, generation after generation, a beacon of hope and love that would never fade. In the end, their story was simple but profound. A cowboy opened his home to a woman in need. That woman worked in his kitchen without speaking. In the silence, they found each other, and the cowboy learned that her silence hid the deepest love he would ever know. From that love came a family, a legacy, and a story that would never be forgotten. It was a love story for the ages, set against the wild beauty of the American West, proving that even in the hardest times and the harshest places, love can bloom and flourish and change everything. Their descendants continue to live on the land Isaac and Clara built together. The ranch has been modernized over the years, but the original house still stands, preserved as a reminder of where it all began. Visitors sometimes come to see it, to hear the story, to stand in the kitchen where Clara once worked in silence and fell in love with a kind cowboy who saw past her inability to speak to the woman underneath. And always, always, the story ends with hope. Because if Isaac and Clara could find love in the midst of trauma and fear and danger, if they could build a life together that lasted and mattered and created ripples that extended far into the future, then anyone can find love. Anyone can heal. Anyone can build something beautiful from broken pieces. That is the legacy of Isaac and Clara Abernathy. Not just a successful ranch or a large family, but the enduring truth that love conquers all, that silence can speak louder than words, and that the deepest connections are those that see beyond the surface to the soul underneath. Their love story began in the summer of 1878, when a broken woman appeared at a lonely cowboy's ranch. It continued through trials and triumphs, through silence and speech, through fear and freedom. And it endures still, in the hearts of their descendants, in the story passed down through generations. In the very land they loved and tended and called home, the woman who worked in his kitchen without speaking taught the cowboy that love does not always need words. The cowboy who offered her safety and kindness taught the woman that she was worthy of love. Together, they built a life that mattered, a family that thrived, and a love story that would never be forgotten. Under the vast Arizona sky, in the harsh beauty of the desert, two broken people found each other and became whole. And that, in the end, is the greatest story of all.